Hopefully everybody can see my screen.
Looks like that's coming through pretty well.
Okay, cool. All right, so kind of this presentation is more related to tracking ADA transition plan progress using the GIS tools that we have. A couple years ago, I think at this conference, an Esri conference, I'd presented on utilizing, creating an interactive transition plan, showing, what the plan, the data collection data and analysis data and everything from the plan itself. And so this is kind of a follow-up. I'm going to try to go through some of this a little quicker. That way I can have a little more time on Q&A on the back end. Hopefully I get through that. Just because the previous one, I didn't have a lot of time for Q&A, but I want to make sure that, if you guys have questions, you can definitely ask those questions. So a little bit about me. I got my camera off this time just to make sure the bandwidth is going towards the presentation here, but hey, that's what I look like. So I've been professionally, over 25 years in computer technologies, hobby level beyond that, 16 years in GIS and civil engineering. I do have a civil engineering design background, and I've gotten, I enjoy visualization, so that got me into GIS. I do lead the GIS services team at Transpo Group, but I like to do teaching and things like that. I have served, I am a part-time instructor for Lake Washington Institute of Technology here in Kirkland, Washington, for Civil 3D CAD design and also different GIS software. So I have been, a consultant and public agency employee. So I do have that experience and background. So I can, put a different hat on and criticize myself and, well, this consultant needs to give me this data. So I have that background and I can, understand that a little bit better. And I do like all the interactive tools and visualization. That's what's got me into doing some presentations. And so that's kind of where we're at here. And so a little bit about the presentation. Hey, what's a ADA presentation without, let's just take care of any legal requirements that you might want to know quickly. Do a kind of a recap of my previous presentation, and kind of get into, the barrier removal progress tracking that we can do. And I'd like to do a live demonstration this time. I wasn't able to do that last time. And then follow up with that Q&A. All right, so just recapping here, like I said, this was the presentation I had previously, just making those transition plans interactive. So here's the legal info. Basically, it's saying, hey, all state, local, federal governments need to provide accommodations, whether it's transportation, facilities, telecommunications for people, persons with disabilities. So it's pretty self-explanatory there. In the ADA Title II, this is where it is requiring that agencies have a transition plan and a self-assessment. So basically identifying the obstacles within the facilities, whether it's buildings, whether it's physical facilities, within a pedestrian access route, such as sidewalks and pathways, curb ramps, etc. So the traditional or typical ways that that's been doing, kind of more non-GIS, that there's been some efforts to be ADA compliant. We ended up doing more of those types of things within, paper forms, spreadsheets. You might have those saved on your computer, printed out, whichever. And they might not all address those barriers and features that are within a pedestrian access route or PAR that you might hear. And again, if you're not keeping up on things, it can quickly be outdated. Typical ADA transition plans have been just, printed on a plan and throw some, the plan on a shelf, maybe not look at it again. Or maybe, hey, I got a PDF, I'm going to store it. I'll store it on my website, and, whether or not it's being updated or not is, each entity, has to deal with that. So again, that could be outdated in a short order. Typical data collection methods, and I think we all as GIS professionals already kind of know this, but we get paper, spreadsheets, and GPS unit points and data and other data, and we all have to export that or digitize it into a GIS format. Yourself, hey, why still use the static form? The way it was. I mean, everything, especially during this time in our lives, really does need to move towards more of a web GIS interactive environment. So a few things that helps this process with self-assessments is utilizing mobile mapping technology. So, we're getting beyond just, having to have a GPS unit and then exporting data that way. Still is a method, but with the new advancements in our mobile mapping technology, especially with Esri and the Collector app and also the Field Maps app, it gives us this ability to have real-time interactive feedback. So whether it's a web application through ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Enterprise, through a portal, or even ArcGIS Pro, you can connect to this data and it's live. And that's kind of the direction that we all, I think, know. So, things that using Collector app, field collection, having a mapping grade type of, self-assessment is good. It doesn't have to be, the dead on that assets. I mean, a lot of times we can take aerials and fix it that way. But it allows you to do measurements in the field, do the drop downs to fill that data in, pictures, everything is, going on in the field that way. And so what that allows in the back end is that we can create some different queries and conditional formatting to know if there's sections and assets that got missed. And so it really, from managers to field techs, it really helps unify what we're seeing in a live environment. It really helps also with QC and QA to do that on the fly. So we're not just getting, a GPS unit that we're exporting data and then we got to look at the quality and then send people back out. You can do that in a live environment. So I wanted to add this or keep this slide in. It basically, we kind of know in the ADA realm, it's like, oh, curb ramps and sidewalks. But a lot of times we end up, forgetting there's other things that that do have ADA requirements, and such as pedestrian push buttons. That's one that gets missed quite often. Crosswalks, there are some standards on that. Pedestrian crossings on railroads. Stairs, wheelchair ramps, which are different than the curb ramps. ADA parking stalls, there's standards for all of those things, as well as the different types of barriers. So, we may not capture all the barriers that we may need to. So there's, vertical uplifts, or there's, horizontal cracks, or there's poles, which are fixed objects, and movable objects, say an A-frame in the middle of the sidewalk is a barrier. Even vegetation, so we're protruding objects. And so one of the things that I found as a civil designer really helpful is jumping on a wheelchair and trying to traverse these assets, you know, the features in that pedestrian access route. That was a big eye opener for me. One of the other things I did is close my eyes, try to walk down sidewalk as best I could and see if I run into some bushes or things like that. So those are, you know, things that, you know, we can do as professionals to understand the disabled community. So then, you know, you got your self-assessment, you got your features, you create your database, whether it's hosted online or enterprise. Whether it's, you know, you can do the hosting in a SQL database, or you can also, you know, just have it on a file geodatabase. But obviously, it's not interacting live if you're doing that. So I would still recommend kind of more of the ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. So you got your self-assessment, and you got your final database. And so you have to do a little bit of analysis. There's some geoprocessing tools to look at that information to kind of prioritize, say what's the worst of the worst that could help in that transition process. Now this is a simplistic form. You know, there's more things to a curb ramp than just these, but basically, when it hits a certain ADA threshold, it gets a score, and that's how you know, figure out the accessibility type of, you know, index score on the severity of that accessible barrier. Another thing to look at would be pedestrian generating locations, and that's kind of a proximity to those generators. And then what you would do here is, you know, you want to find out those overlapping generators, you know, within the proximity to find, you know, how many, you know, pedestrians may be going across a different feature. Might be a little bit more high priority than something that might be in a residential that only has 1 or 2 criteria it hits. Another thing for on-site work, it could be that you would use kind of a route demand analysis instead of that proximity to pedestrian generators. Basically, you know, if you have building uses that pull more pedestrians down a route, that's another way to prioritize those access routes. And at the very end, you get the combined index score that gives you good, you know, heat map on kind of a visual on like, hey, those are areas that might want to look at. So, you know, basically I was previously talking about moving over to the interactive transition plans. So, you know, there's some data collection, you can visualize some barriers, analysis, mapbook, and then the tracking tool is kind of what I'm wanting to get to soon here. But so one of the things that's nice with the web viewer application, you know, this is one of those things that you can see dynamic in real time as field data collection is being done, which has been, you know, really for us, it's been a good thing to, you know, when we're working with clients to basically like, hey, this is where the field staff is. So it's been good. Another thing that is pretty nice to do is, you know, have a visualization on the types of barriers. And it really, if you're looking at this screenshot, you really can see there's patterns along different corridors. So, you know, if there's a corridor that's got a lot of protruding objects, well, hey, that's a quick win for you in the way you just dispatch your, you know, maintenance staff out to clear out those vegetation barriers. Some of the other ones are a little, you know, might trigger some projects that you might need to eliminate those barriers, but there are some quick wins when you start visualizing this. Analysis and prioritization. It's another, you know, web app that you can create to visualize those, allowing you know, users to zoom in closer to the projects that they would be interested in and you know, have that information. Another thing, have done paper map books in the past. A lot of times those just sit on the shelf, and even a PDF very rarely would be getting used. So, you know, utilizing web apps and interactive data to help with searches for IDs for different assets. You don't need that paper map book anymore. We'll get to this a little bit further, but basically it's like, why not utilize GIS to document and track progress annually? And you don't need desktop software if you build it in a WebGIS environment. So there's there's some, hats or shout outs to Quilla and Duval and UW for allowing me to share some of the data that they have, and some others that have given me permission. But one of the things that you can do using it is the older story map series, but linking the web apps within a central application. So I'll kind of show you that. And so here's kind of a brief list of some agencies and schools that we've worked with, and we have some others. It continues to we continue to work with different agencies to help them out. So let's just jump into what I'm really wanting to talk about here. I did some screenshots just in case something goes haywire with the live demonstrations here, but I want to put a little caveat in here. This is demonstration data only. So I know we're recording, but don't look at this and go, oh my goodness, this is like, I got a big problem. It's not about that. This is all data that's for demonstration purposes. So anyway, yeah, so you can kind of look at some work that was done for several campuses within UW, and work with Bellingham as well. So I just I'm showing you things from the barrier removal tracking side of things that we've done with other agencies. So this is some things that we've done with the dashboards, giving live data that was linked to the barrier removal database. And so those are things that you can create, and I'm about to jump into those. And so let me see here. All right, so let me just go over here to this barrier removal tracking. You can kind of see that, I did bring this up in the previous session that I did a couple years ago. Of each of these tabs are linking to different either web maps or web applications. It's pretty slick in doing that, but I can talk about that a little bit later if you wanted to chat about that offline, or if there's some questions later on. But basically, all of the entire database from the ADA transition plan is all available to a user within this non-GIS application environment, so the Interactive WebGIS. And so it's just simple things like, hey, maybe we did a project in this area. And so, yeah, we repaired this sidewalk. Let's just say sidewalk replacement, some, date repaired. Let's just use today's date. And then if there's MEF documentation, what that is maximum extent feasible. So there are some things that you will find that you cannot meet an ADA standard. And so you have to justify why you couldn't, and that's that maximum extent feasible. And let's just say that sidewalk cost, I don't know, $5,000. Put my initials there, and then, I can basically go test project or something. So anyway, you get there, you close it out, and you can kind of see that area now turns green. And so whether it's a point line, polygon. This is, how we can use that interactive environment to, to track that progress. So there are things that we can do on the back end, since this is a hosted database. Doing some reports on an annual, how many things have been replaced, things of that nature. Here's that dashboard I was talking to you about earlier, or I showed you earlier. What's really nice about this, I'll show you in the demo here, but all of this, the dashboard is live. So, if I wanted to zoom down to my area here, some information in this dashboard will show based on the zoom level. Or you can have data that's just related to the entire database, whatever you want to do. So another example from a city agency. Again, shout out to Bellingham for allowing me to demo. But again, this, as I mentioned before, this is make-believe data for demonstration purposes. So, if you need to talk to Bellingham about any GIS things, go directly to them. So, so the same thing goes, with this one here, where it's like, hey, maybe a push button was replaced. You can, edit that data like I did in the previous one. Usually we have attribute or attachments enabled, which then you can attach, say, MEF documentation or any other, things related to that asset within the database. On the tracking dashboard side, this one I found we did a little bit different than what you saw in the UW campus. This one, you can see everything is dynamic to what you see in the map. So whether it's the cost of the improvements or the percentage of the improvements, if there's something not showing up, it's probably not in the area. And so this one was kind of a nice thing that we were able to do. All right, so let me jump back to my presentation here. All right, so did the live demo. It's kind of summarizing, kind of went over the legal information. You can look up that more detail later. Did that recap from the other presentation I did and kind of showed some things regarding tracking your progress using WebGIS, whether it's dashboards or a collection of things or just an application. Just kind of went over that. So that said, you can always talk to me offline through my Transpo email, or if you look at my profile on here, I do have my personal web email through Hotmail. You can ping me there as well. I definitely like to share these things with you guys, and there's a lot of things that we can do. So I think I'll just open it up to some questions here. Yeah, do we have any questions? Because I think my screen's...
All right, I think so for everyone attending, if you want to head over to the Whova app, if you have any questions, definitely post them there for Bob. Even if we can't get to them in the next few minutes, the Q&A is open for the duration of the conference, and so he can always come back, even if you think of a question later, and get that answered for you. Bob, something that I thought about was, I think both in the collection and the visualization, there's just so much data in terms of the compliance, but also like the reporting back with your dashboard. Are there some tips, maybe even just generally beyond ADA, for helping people to visualize so many pieces of data at once?
Well, I mean, one of the things that that we've had to break, and this is kind of why we did break apart in map series tabs, different applications, was that I think my original several years back was like, hey, let's just put everything in one. And that got really, really hard to deal with, especially with the fact that we're still limited with the web apps not being able to group areas, group data. So turning layers off and on, we kind of solved that issue by using, connecting or using a map series type of story map as the front end, and then just connected a bunch of web apps that were symbolized more theme-wise to what that tab said. But even in the app, there has been things you can toggle on, toggle off, but that was a way that we were able to group data together that was more themed to kind of address those visualization visualization issues. So I hope that kind of answered your question there.
Yeah, thank you for that tip. We have one more quick question I think we have time for. Someone asked, I noticed you are using a classic story map with the tabs to frame your apps and dashboards. Are you planning on building an experience using Experience Builder moving forward?
Yes, that is kind of the next step in the process here, because having multiple pages and things like that within that environment, that is definitely that next step in this kind of in what we're doing in regards to ADA transition plans. But one of the things that I may show that something's a little more ADA themed, but this can be built for a lot of different types of data that you want to show. But Experience Builder is in my next step roadmap. So that'll most likely be, try to share one of those later on. And integrating some different other viewers and stuff like GeoCortex and things like that. So yeah, that's in the works.
All right, great. Well, thank you for that. There's one more question coming in. Bob, I'm going to let you maybe answer that through the Whova app outside of the webinar. But thank you. It was so great to have you. And for everyone else tuning in, just remember that you can keep posting those questions for Bob to go back and answer. And you can have that conversation continuing throughout the conference in that Whova application. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for everybody for attending.